Good afternoon, everyone. This is Erin DeSandro. I'm the Philanthropic Relations Associate, and I'm pleased to welcome you to GuideStar's second Impact Call of 2017. We're excited to have you join us today to talk through some of the exciting things we've been working on. But before we begin, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. If you've joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system and you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Also, as always, we've blocked off a few minutes at the end of today's event to answer your questions. To submit a question to today's presenters, type it into the questions pane of the control panel on the right-hand side of the screen. You may submit questions at any time. We will collect these and try to address as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Next, we're recording today's event, and you'll receive that recording and a copy of the slides within a day or two. On to today's agenda. First, some opening remarks and an overview of GuideStar's work in the sector from President and CEO Jacob Harold. Following that, our Senior Director of Programs, Nico, will share some recent updates about GuideStar Platinum. Next, our VP of Strategy and Finance, Ms. Kusairi, will present last quarter's financial and programmatic results. We'll wrap up with our lessons learned and answering your questions. Jacob, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Erin, and welcome everyone to this quarter's Impact Call. Next slide, please. So, why do we do this? What are these calls all about? They are an attempt on GuideStar's part to proactively share what's happened at GuideStar in the last 3 months and to give you a glimpse into the direction that we're heading. It's an opportunity for us to share with you, but it's also an opportunity for us to learn from you, which is why we really encourage you all to participate through the questions box. And they may be questions that are specific to the content that we'll be sharing on this Impact Call, or they might be more general questions. Either just fine. And you will see in Miz's section, she will be sharing a set of highly quantitative financial and programmatic results from the last quarter. But in Eva's section, we'll go into a bit more depth about what I consider to be one of the most exciting things that GuideStar is working on right now, GuideStar Platinum. But before I turn it over to Eva, let me just give a quick overview for those of you who are new to our Impact Calls and perhaps new to GuideStar strategy as to GuideStar's place in the broader nonprofit community. Next slide, please. So this visual here is how we represent GuideStar's role as we see it within the philanthropic family. And it is essentially a supply chain. We are in the middle of a flow of information from those on the left-hand side who have information about nonprofits to those on the right-hand side who need that information, whether an individual donor deciding where to give or a nonprofit trying to find a partner, a researcher trying to understand the nonprofit sector, et cetera. And next, please. And nonprofits are at the heart of this supply chain. Fundamentally, the data we share is about nonprofits, and nonprofits are the most important source of information for GuideStar. Next, please. The bulk of the data that we have at GuideStar does come to us via the IRS, but its ultimate source is still nonprofits. But we are able to be more confident that that data is correct because it has a government stamp of approval. But just as none of us would want to tell our stories as American taxpayers just through our 1040, nonprofits have a bigger story to tell than they're able to tell through their 990, which is why 135,000 nonprofits have come to GuideStar to provide additional data to ensure that their profile is up to date. And the Platinum data that Eva will be talking about soon is a key component of that. Next slide, please. And then at GuideStar, we organize that information, try to make it useful and searchable, and build tools, next please, that allow us to distribute that data through 2 primary channels. The first one on the top there is our website, GuideStar.org. It's used by about 8 million people every year, the vast majority of them using it for free. But then importantly, that data is also distributed through our 218 partners, which include Facebook, Google, Amazon, the donor-advised funds of Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab, and many others. And our hope is to get to a point where the actors of social change, whether donors or individual nonprofits, are able to focus on their missions and spend less time thinking about how to gather the right data or how to tell their story, and know that they can do that once on GuideStar, and that will populate throughout the internet for the many, many people who need good information about nonprofits. So with that, I will hand it over to Eva and let her talk about what, again, I think is one of the most exciting new types of data that we're gathering here at GuideStar and what we've learned in our first year. So with that, Eva.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm very excited to be sharing with you all some reflections on Platinum. And before I dive in, let me first say what Platinum is. It is GuideStar's newest seal of transparency, and it recognizes organizations for sharing information about their progress and results. Before we dive into what we're observing from this effort, I have a question for you all. I would love to launch a poll that asks, when it comes to measuring progress and results, as a nonprofit sector, we're right where we should be, behind the times, maybe ahead of the curve, or it depends, we're so varied. I'd love for the audience to weigh in on this question right now, which will help me contextualize Platinum's work overall. We'll give you all about a minute or two. I believe the poll is live to answer the question, and then we'll go on with the presentation. As you all are answering the question, let me give you a little bit of information about why GuideStar launched its Platinum Seal. Many of you know that we've been involved in the sector working on the Overhead Myth campaign, and have, as a result of that, let people know that it's not just administrative costs that matter, it's the actual progress and results that matter. But to date, we have not had a lot of great information to share about what that progress and results look like. So that's why we launched Platinum to begin with. And it seems like you all have weighed in on, where we are, and, many of you obviously feel it's very dependent on the organization, perhaps the issue area, and maybe there are some organizations and issues where, it really depends, right? Some of them have great information about their progress. Not many people feel we're ahead of the curve, and not that many people feel we're right where we should be. We're either behind, or maybe that question is hard to answer. So that's very interesting, and it leads us into why we started the Platinum work to begin with. So as you all know, GuideStar recognizes organizations for their transparency, and Platinum is our highest seal. In it, we ask organizations to share their measures, their actual measures and results in terms of quantitative metrics to show the difference that they're making. So let's talk a little bit about what we see from the data and the participation. Let's advance to the next slide. Thank you. So our progress in Platinum. Let's begin on the next slide with looking at how many organizations are participating. To date, we've seen that over 2,000 organizations have earned a Platinum Seal of Transparency since we launched this effort only in May last year. And we see that many organizations are coming in the door. We are growing in participation at about an average rate of 55% per quarter. So definitely participation in Platinum is growing. When we think about who is actually participating, on the next slide, we're able to see that organizations of all sizes are participating. And we deliberately try to make Platinum very welcoming so that organizations of all sizes could participate. We do see that organizations with significant revenue from $1 to about $5 million are overrepresented. Those are some of the larger organizations, but you see in the blue columns that organizations of all sizes, including ones that don't have any revenue at all, are also sharing their platinum metrics. So we've been pleased to see that success. On the next slide, we also were curious to see, which issue areas do we have some information about currently, how are organizations participating from that perspective. And we see that, first of all, organizations across all issue areas are participating. So the way Platinum's been designed, it's working in the sense that whether you're an organization working in the health field or the human services field or the environment and animals field or education, you are able to share your metrics that make sense for your work, which is tremendous. And we do see that currently human services organizations are representing the larger fraction of participants, but you also see participants across the issue areas. So next, we wanted to talk a little bit about the way that folks are sharing metrics. So first of all, GuideStar provided a resource. We didn't want you all to start just with a blank page and a big question, which is how do you measure your progress on results? That is the question, but we've provided a resource called the Common Results Catalog. It was a research effort and a synthesis of measures from experts and from reports and from organizations working in the sector that said, here's a catalog essentially of metrics that you could use or you might be using currently, and we would love to know how you're doing on these metrics. If you don't find a metric that reflects your work in the catalog, no worries. You can always share a custom metric that fits your organization. And what's wonderful is that over time, we will be adding those custom metrics into the catalog to reflect and make sure that that resource evolves based on what we're really observing. So what we see currently is that, there are over 2,800 organizations in process on Platinum, and 2,000 of them have actually published their results. And if we just advance quickly, I think those two numbers will become highlighted. And what that says is that there are many organizations that are currently working on their metrics. They're in progress. We also see that over 8,000 metrics have been published, and that the average number of metrics per organization is about 4. So we're sharing that organizations are obviously measuring multiple things to reflect their progress. It's not just one number. Finally, we see when we first provided the resource in the catalog, we wondered, were people going to use it? Was it going to be helpful? Well, we see that over 70% of the metrics that have been shared do come from the Common Results Catalog, and about 30% have been added as custom metrics. Let's move forward. So that's just what I covered today. Many of you, I'm sure, are curious about what is actually being shared and the sort of the quality of the metrics. So we've done an effort to categorize some of the metrics that have been shared into commonly kind of understood categories. Some metrics are inputs, meaning that they reflect the resources that a nonprofit needs in order to do its work. So for example, the number of donors or the number of volunteers that a nonprofit has. And organizations are sharing information in Platinum about that. We also see that organizations are sharing about their outputs, which is the direct result of their activities. So the number of clients served, the number of workshops delivered related to the services or work that they might do directly. We also see organizations sharing some outcomes, which means that they are helping us learn about the effect of the work on the ultimate people served by the work, the beneficiaries. For example, the number of clients who maintained employment after a service has been received or delivered. So we do see a variety, and maybe not unexpectedly, we see that a lot of organizations are very conversant in the activities that they conduct, and they're sharing lots of rich information about that. Finally, I would like to talk a little bit about what we're seeing from the custom metrics work. So on the next slide, we've highlighted a few things that we're learning. So first of all, we are learning that that organizations really think very specifically about either the people, or the environment or the creatures served by that organization. And they're really thinking hard about the target population that's being served. And that's often reflected in the metrics, and it's a nuance because I think often organizations in the social sector are really serving the hardest to serve populations, and they want to reflect that, help us understand that. We also see that often organizations are sharing very program-specific metrics. They're also interested in providing more context about the work. So for example, if you're an organization working on veterans issues, you might share a metric around the veteran population in your area in order to contextualize the work that you do. We have deliberately oriented Platinum to start sharing kind of the absolute quantities, but often organizations want to share the percentage metrics, kind of talk about their progress in those terms. And so we will be incorporating that going forward. And then finally, we do see organizations actually sharing metrics about from the people that they serve. What do they think about the work and the service and the value of those services? And so we see beneficiary feedback metrics being shared as well, which is an excellent sign. So in terms of how we're moving forward with Platinum, I wanted to share a few kind of opportunities that we see going forward. So on the next slide, we've outlined, the fact that because we see this high usage of the Common Results Catalog, and because we see that most organizations are sharing outputs, not outcomes, we actually want to enrich the catalog with your help and start to feature more outcomes metrics in the catalog to be a resource to the field. We also see that many organizations are sharing context metrics about the issue that they address, which we feel is a very rich source of information. And so we are going to be adding a problem statement into the GuideStar profile in order to enable organizations to share more about that. Why are they doing the work that they do, and what do they know about that work? We are also looking at sharing beneficiary feedback more explicitly, or marking those metrics more explicitly on the profile. And finally, we'll obviously be also working towards incorporating percentage-based metrics into Platinum as well to help organizations share those. So that's a little bit about Platinum. There are many great reasons outlined on the next page about why Platinum matters. It is our highest recognition of commitment to transparency, and we believe that by participating, organizations are really shifting the conversation away from simple expenses and overhead and towards where it should be, which is the progress and results. And then I'll end my section with a final question for you all, which is, where would you like to see Platinum go in the future? We're really interested in how you might like to use this data. So there are a few choices here. I want to search for orgs by their results. You might want to find orgs that way. I'd like to compare orgs and learn about them. I want to find the best-in-class metrics that I can use in my work, all of the above, or maybe something else entirely. And if you could weigh in here for a minute. While that happens, I'll just highlight that Platinum is not the only exciting effort at GuideStar. We're also doing work in the next quarter on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. We have a data collection effort going on diversity, and we would like to expand it. And if that's something that you're interested in, perhaps you should let us know, and we will be, I'm sure, talking about it on future impact calls. So I'd love to see if there are some results. It sounds like a lot of participants are, really interested in all of the above, that this is something we're not able to do today, and thanks to Platinum, we hope to do in the near future. And so thank you so much for your feedback, and we're excited to continue with Platinum, and I'll hand it over to my colleague, Ms.
Thanks so much, Eva. That was really exciting stuff. I'm going to dive right in here to our programmatic results, and before I start, I'm going to walk us through our revised theory of change. For those of you who were on the call, I think a couple calls ago, end of 2016, we started, as we were getting ready to launch Platinum, or, a year plus ago, we wanted to make sure that we could also walk the walk and talk the talk. And so we looked at revising our theory of change, which I will walk through here. We realized that GuideStar, represented in terms of our activities in blue, is just one of many infrastructure organizations in the sector. And so the work that we do and the work of others leads to the user outcomes, as you see here, various outcomes by the users of GuideStar and the other infrastructure organizations, which then leads to ultimately the field level outcomes. Better, smarter, more giving from donors, and less waste and higher performance from nonprofits. And when we think about, from left to right, GuideStar's activities, user outcomes, and field outcomes, when we wanted to think about measuring our progress and our results, we really looked at our evaluation framework as evidenced by the questions on the bottom. So you'll see our metrics and are we providing what we set out to provide, the evidence of what we're providing, is it leading to the outcomes that we envision, and then finally, is there enough research or existing research that proves the connections between user and field outcomes above. So today I'm going to focus on the first, which is metrics. On the next slide, I'm going to start us off by talking through data. So answering the key questions for us as we evaluate our work. How much data do we have? That's been growing over time, over 3 billion. In terms of the quality of the data, Eva spent a lot of time talking through this, looking at our progress in Q1 2017. We have nearly 40,000 nonprofits sharing information with us and over 2,000 at that highest level, the platinum level of transparency. On the next slide, I'll talk us through our tools and resources. And this is where we had to kind of really dig deep and figure out what are the right metrics to share here. We're still figuring out if these are the right ones, but I'll walk you through 3 that we are tracking. The first is the number of new and renewed customers across our product categories. You'll see our web and platform and data services categories. And then on the right is, of those customers, how often are they coming back to our website? And we see nearly 50% of our customers are coming to GuideStar.org on a monthly basis. On the bottom, we looked at number of searches just to understand what kind of information are users looking for on GuideStar, and as we track those and other product level and feature level metrics, how can we further understand what your needs are so that we can develop the right features and products to serve you and your needs better. On the next slide, I'll talk about reach. So if you recall the data hub diagram that Jacob walked us through, the top 2 metrics talk about metrics on GuideStar.org. So the number of registered users and unique users each quarter that come to GuideStar.org. We're happy that those continue to be on an upward trend. And then on the bottom 2, those are metrics relating to how GuideStar information shows up on other people's websites as well as on our GuideStar for grant applications. Overall, you'll see these as well as other metrics are generally on an upward trend, but we believe that the rate of growth is not as fast as we would prefer or would have liked, and Eva will talk a little bit about that in our lessons learned. Next slide, please. This on our thought leadership, we do many things. This webinar is one example, but we decided to dive deep into blogs. And the top one there is a really interesting one to me. It looks at the number of blogs published in the orange, which has increased slightly, but the blog views has increased exponentially. We see that even though our team is producing slightly more blogs than in the past, but the number of viewers that are looking at those blogs and clicking through is just significantly higher. So we believe that's indicative of our ability to create higher quality blogs and hopefully attracting even more attention in the future. The last one on earned media placement looks at the number of mentions that GuideStar has in the Muse, and if you're like me, you would have noticed that big spike there in Q4, which is when there was a lot of talk, obviously, about the Clinton and Trump foundations, and so we saw a lot of GuideStar mentions there. Transitioning now from programmatic results to financial results, on the next slide, I'll talk us through very quickly on our revenue and expense performance. Revenue for Q1 was on budget. We tracked nearly 3.2 million in unrestricted in total revenue, and our expenses were much lower than budget at $3 million versus 3.6, which resulted in a net operating surplus of $0.4 million or $400,000 and a change in total net assets of $200,000. So results overall, we believe it's mainly due to timing, but we're happy that it's favorable in our direction. On the last slide on financial results here, I'll quickly walk through that our balance sheet, remains weak. We've kept cash steady and our asset level steady, but we would like to continue to improve that overall. Our cash coverage ratios, as you'll see in the chart below, the table also reflects the delayed expenses, as I mentioned, so those cash ratios are better than we expected as well. With that, I will hand it back to Eva.
Thanks, Ms. So just a quick highlight on the lesson learned. We know that as you saw, our theory of change is a living framework, and it is constantly something that we are revisiting, especially in terms of our assumptions behind the work. We know that the theory of change is then tied to the metrics shared, and we see in our Platinum work that it is a challenge for organizations to really identify some of their top metrics, that this is something that is taking perhaps longer and more discussion for organizations, that it's something that really the sector could benefit from. So we do think that participation is a little bit slower than we expected, because I think it sets a high bar for organizations to really publicly share some of that information. But we're very hopeful about the way that Platinum is growing going forward, and we hope that it will be a really great resource for the field. I'll stop there and perhaps see if there were any questions that have come through that we have a minute or two for.
Yes, thanks, Eva. So it looks like we have time for just a few questions. And on a more fun and personal note, we did get one question in the box that wants to know if Gabe Cohen, our Senior Director of Communications, has had his baby yet. So Jacob or Gabe, would you like to speak to that?
The answer is yes. And yeah, this is Gabe. I'm just back today. My wife and I welcomed a little baby Finley Parker Cohen on May 10th, and everyone is happy and healthy, but I'm a bit brain dead, this being my first day back, so Aaron's filling in for me, moderating today.
Yes, and we are happy to have him back. Another question that we got in was from John, and he would like to know, how do I create a theory of change for my own organization? Jacob, would you want to touch on this quickly?
Sure. So this is a great question, and there's no simple answer. But fundamentally, what you're trying to do with a theory of change is articulate the logic of how the stuff you do makes a better world. And what we would suggest that you start with your mission statement. And think, can you go up to a chalkboard or a whiteboard or just a big piece of paper and draw out the logic behind your mission statement and how the stuff you do at your organization, when you come in the morning, how that relates to the better world that you imagine in your mission statement. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a living document. It's the sort of thing that, as much as anything, is meant to help an organization ensure that there's alignment in your thinking about how your organization's activities actually help to advance your mission. So my one piece of advice is to just get started and to draw it out from whatever you already have and to share that with key stakeholders of your organization, whether that's staff, board members, donors, or whomever.
All right, thank you so much, Jacob. We are about at time right now. I just want to thank everyone so much for joining GuideStar's Impact Call, and we hope that you'll join us again next quarter on August 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great day. Thank you.